There are many different ways to categorize goods. Are you ready to learn one more? Things we need to look for in public versus private goods. Number one, whether they are excludable or non-excludable. And number two, whether they are rival or non-rival. Chalkboard, take it away.
So, the difference between public versus private goods. Let's look at a chart. So, we've established you have goods that are rival in consumption. Basically, the same unit of a good cannot be consumed by more than one person at a time. However, there's also non-rival, when more than one person can consume the same unit at once. Then that can be excludable, where the supplier of the good can prevent those who don't pay from using it, and then non-excludable, where the producer cannot prevent people who don't pay, which puts them subject to the free rider problem, where people who won't pay for the non-excludable object will pay not only for themselves, but also for everyone who's taking a free ride on them because they refuse to pay. Now, if you're excludable and rival, it's a private good. If it's non-rival and excludable, it's an artificially scarce good. If it's non-excludable and non-rival, and if it's not excludable but rival, it's an artificially scarce. I'm very sorry, that is incorrect. It is not artificially scarce. It is a common resource if it's non-excludable and rival, and it's a public resource if it is non-rival and non-excludable. So, let's look at why markets can only provide private goods. Markets are typically the best means for society to deliver goods and services to its members. They're efficient except in the case of market power, externalities, or other instances of market failure. One source of this failure is rooted in the nature of the good itself. Markets cannot supply goods and services efficiently unless they are private goods, expendable and rival in consumption. To see why this is crucial, suppose that a farmer only had two choices, either to produce no wheat or to provide a bushel of wheat to every resident of the county who wants it, whether or not the resident pays for it. It seems unlikely that anyone would want to grow wheat under these conditions. Yet the operator of the public sewage system faces the same problem, the free rider problem. If the good is non-excludable, rational customers won't be willing to pay for it. The forces of self-interest alone do not lead to an efficient level of production of these goods and of these non-excludable goods. Even though consumers would benefit from increased production of the good, no one individual is willing to pay more, so no producer is willing to supply it. So these non-excludable goods suffer from inefficiently low production in a market economy. In fact, in the face of the free rider problem, self-interest may not ensure that any amount of the good, let alone the efficient quantity, is produced. Goods that are excludable and non-rival in consumption, such as pay-per-view movies, face a different type of inefficiency. As long as the good is excludable, it's possible to earn a profit by making it only available to those who pay. Therefore, producers are willing to supply an excludable good. But the marginal cost of letting an additional viewer watch pay-per-view movie is zero because it is non-rival in consumption. So the efficient price to the customer is also zero. Or, to put it another way, individuals should watch TV movies up to the point where their marginal benefit is zero. But if the cable company actually charges viewers $4, consumers will only consume the good up to the point where their marginal benefit is $4. When consumers must pay a price greater than zero for a good that is non-rival in consumption, the price they pay is higher than the marginal cost of allowing them to consume the good, which is zero. So in a market economy, goods that are non-rival in consumption suffer from inefficiently low consumption. Now we see why private goods are the only ones that are produced in a market economy. Because private goods are excludable, producers can charge for them and have an incentive to produce them. And because they are rival in consumption, it is efficient for consumers to pay a positive price equal to the marginal cost of production. However, public goods are the exact opposite, non-excludable and non-rival. A public sewage system, national defense, clean water, all these are disease prevention and scientific research are all public goods. Now, these are provided in a multitude of different ways. The government always doesn't need to get involved. In many cases, non-governmental solutions have been found for the free rider problem, but many of these solutions are imperfect in some way. Some public goods are supplied through voluntary contributions, such as private donations to public radio and scientific research, but private donations are insufficient to finance large programs of great importance, such as centers for disease control and prevention and national defense. Some public goods are supplied by self-interested individuals or firms because they are able to make money off them in an indirect way. For example, broadcast television is supported entirely by advertising. The downside is such indirect funding is that it skews the nature and quantity of the goods that are supplied while imposing additional costs on consumers. Stations show the program that yield the most advertising revenue, which are not necessarily the programs people most want to see, and viewers must endure many commercials. Some potentially public goods are deliberately made excludable and subject to charge, like pay-per-view movies. In small communities, social encouragement or pressure can be brought to bear on people to contribute money or time to provide an efficient level of a public good. Volunteer fire departments are a good example, but as communities grow larger and more anonymous, social pressure is increasingly difficult to supply, compelling larger towns and cities to tax residents and depend on salaried firefighters for these fire protection services. As the last example suggests, when other solutions fail, it is up to the government to provide public goods. Indeed, the most important public goods, national defense, the legal system, disease control, fire protection in large cities, and so on, are provided by the government and paid for by taxes. The provision of public goods is one of the crucial roles of the government. Now, common resources is a good that is not excludable but rival in competition, like fish in the ocean. The biggest problem that happens with something like this is overuse. Because it's non-excludable, individuals cannot be charged for their use, but the resources are rival in consumption, so an individual who uses a unit depletes the resource by making that unit unavailable to others. This is the definition of overuse, where an individual continues to use a resource until their marginal private benefit is equal to their marginal private cost, ignoring the cost that this action inflicts on society as a whole. The efficient use of these is similar to those created by negative externalities, so the solutions are also similar. To ensure efficient use of the common resource, society must find a way to get individual users of the resource to take into account the costs they impose on others, through taxing or otherwise regulating the use of the common resource, creating a system of tradable licenses for the right to use the resource, and making the common resource excludable and assigning property rights to some individuals. The final category is artificially scarce goods, a good that is excludable but non-rival in consumption. We've already talked about pay-per-view movies as a common example. The marginal cost to society of allowing an individual to watch a movie is zero because one person's viewing doesn't interfere with another person's viewing. Yet cable companies prevent an individual from seeing a movie if he or she hasn't paid. Goods like computer software and audio files, which are valued for the information they embody, are sometimes known as information goods, are also artificially scarce. Markets will supply artificially scarce goods because their excludability allows firms to charge a price for them. However, since the efficient price is equal to the marginal cost of zero, and the actual price is something higher than that, the good is artificially scarce and consumption is inefficiently low. The problem is that unless the producer can somehow earn revenue from producing and selling the good, none will have been produced, which is likely to be worse than a positive but inefficient low quantity. That is going to be goods for us. We've seen that in the cases of public goods, common resources, and artificially scarce goods, a market economy just can't provide adequate incentives for efficient levels of production and consumption. Fortunately, for the sake of market efficiency, most goods are private goods. Food, clothing, shelter, and most other desirable things in life are excludable and rival in competition. So the types of market failure discussed in this video are important exceptions rather than the norm. Thank goodness. Goodbye, everybody.